an army nurse. I said, well, where were you stationed? She said, oh, we were in Tagat, Burma.
Right.
I was like, what?
Right.
And the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Every time I think about it, I just get chills all over again because I'm like, I've known this woman all my life, all of my life. And here she is sitting in front of me. She spent her youth in Tagat, Burma. She's a nurse anesthetist. And she and my mom went to school together over in Philly where the black nurses had to learn. But I said, okay, Tagat, Burma, what were you doing over there? She said, oh, we were building the Lido Road. I was like, oh, Jesus.
You're like, the what? Right.
I said, I've never heard of that. What do you mean? And she went on to tell me that the Chinese were our allies, and the Chinese were holding the Japanese back. Okay, we had been fighting okay. Well, the Japanese had captured the main supply route because they didn't have any war materials. We were sending them bombs, trucks, all kind of parts, whatever it was that they needed to fight the war. We sent it to them, and we took it in through Burma, through the Burma Road, up into China, into Kunming, over that way. Well, the Chinese captured the Burma Road, so we couldn't get the materials to them. So the army and everybody decided, well, we'll go to India. We'll fly these materials to them, called over the hump, flying over the hump. Well, the hump were the Himalaya mountains. Well, you can't fly stuff over that; it's too heavy. So they decided that ain't gonna work because the planes. Okay, so they decided they were going to build a road, and they ended up having to run out of Burma because the Japanese were chasing them, right? And they were running away from the border between Burma and China, and they were running toward India. And it happens that these are all just regular army people right now. And they had to run by using the footpath of the native people of Burma. So in order to get over to India, they were following these old traditional routes that had always been there. Well, that leader decided, they asked him what would be the best way to get this road built, and he remembered these footpaths that he had used to run out of Burma. And so they basically went back in and tried to follow that footprint from India through Burma and into China. So the road is like 1,000 miles long over the Himalaya mountains, over all these rivers. And what happened was they followed that footprint until they got to kind of like the border of China. And then they had to go another 200 miles into Kunming. And that's where all the supplies ended up. Once they got to Kunming with different whatever, they left it all there, and a plane would fly them back, and they'd do it all over again. Now, so you're talking about 6,000 black troops. They had their own hospital because of segregation. And that's Miss Lassane. She was a nurse at the 335th Station Hospital in Tagat, Burma, which is at the top of one of the mountains. Okay.
Right.
So they had to have everybody, truck drivers, people who would string the communication lines, people who would have the pipeline, the oil. It's a pipeline that goes all the way from Lido, India, all the way through. So, and then of course you had to have the road builders, the people who built the road. And then you had to have people who could build a bridge. Do you remember when the bridge went out in Pensacola?
Yes.
One of those. Okay. And do you remember the 1-lane bridge they put there?
Yes.
It's a pontoon bridge. And that's the kind of bridge they built during World War II over these mountains during these, because remember, they had flooding there so bad because they had the monsoon season. See? So when the monsoons came, all the rivers would overflow, bridges would be washed out, and they had all these men who knew how to build the pontoon bridges. So you had thousands of these black folks over there doing this work, and it was 24 hours a day, 3 shifts.
Right. So
all day, all night.
And so most of the builders of the Lido Road were African American soldiers, correct?
Correct.
Right. And so from your research, is this something did the soldiers have to be forced into doing this, or is this something that where they kind of signed up to do, or they kind of saw the importance of building the road? Were they in the resistance to any of the white superiors?
So what happened was most of these guys were drafted. Many of them were drafted, and
Okay.
they didn't know what they were going to get into. They knew they had been trained. They had some training right down here in Carabel, because of the kind of terrain and the weather. Okay, so some of them trained right down here. They would come up here to Tallahassee and stay at some couple of houses there across from the bus station. If they had missed the bus, they could stay right up over in there. But anyway, that's another story. But they didn't, like other Black folks during World War II, many wanted to do their part for the country. They wanted to fight, many of them. Just like with this Tuskegee Airmen, they wanted to do that. And these guys, many of them were drafted. Like I said, they didn't necessarily know what they were going to do.
Right.
But once they found out what they were going to do, of course, they did it with pride. I didn't find any of them I had oral histories with maybe a dozen or so. I didn't find any of them to be bitter. They felt some kind of way, because they felt like they weren't recognized for the different things they brought to the table. Like the gentleman here in Tallahassee, Mr. Eddie Barrington, he was in the 45th, and he was a road builder. Okay.
Right.
And he realized at some point to build this road, they had to have rock, not gravel, right? Because you had to have a base.
Right.
And they didn't have any gravel. So he realized that they could go down to the river and get the rock out of the bottom of the river and bring that into the picture, right? So he figured that out. They had like a whole, a way to dig that up and put it on this thing, and it would bring it up to the site, but he didn't get any credit for that. They had a couple of feelings about not getting credit for the innovations they brought to the table, because in most instances, they didn't have the right equipment. They didn't get the right supplies, and they had to figure it out. So because you're talking about building a road through a jungle, so they had to dynamite all the trees, had to clear the path. It was a quite extraordinarily dangerous thing. And their slogan was, they lost quite a few people, of course.
Right.
And they said it was a man a mile. That was what they called it. A man a mile.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of